Alright, so we're just going over the test that you took. Which one are we doing? 9? Okay. What else? Just one problem out of all those? Look at the ones you got wrong the second time and just ask about those. 1? Number 1?
I'm just playing.
Alright, what else? Come on. There's got to be others. 7? Alright, let's do number 1, right? Alright, this one was pretty easy, I got to admit. Watch. These things are being multiplied together. These things are being multiplied together. Okay, so look. Watch. I mean, you're going to look at it and you're going to say the same thing. So you don't distribute, don't multiply those together. If these are being multiplied, these are being multiplied, I can cancel out on this, whatever's the same on the top and the bottom. Look, m plus 7, they cancel out, right? And then that's it. You're done. You just write m minus 5 over m minus 2, and that's it. So, told you. Told you it was easy. All right, so that was number 1. All right, number 7. Here we go. It's 9 over 14 p squared. All right, here we go. We got to add these together. So when you add fractions together, you have to find a common denominator. Okay. So watch, you got 10 and 14. And so you got to find a common denominator with 10 and 14. If you're not really sure, watch. I'll show you a little quick trick. Take 10 and then take 14. Break them down into their prime numbers. Okay, 10 is 2 times 5, and this is 2 times 7. Remember what you do? There's a 2 here and here. It only shows up one time, so you just pick one of them. There's a 5. It only shows up once. You pick one of them. There's a 7. It only shows up once, so you pick one of them. So you multiply those three things together. 2 times 5 is 10, times 7 is 70. So that's my common denominator with 10 and 14. You do the same thing with p and p squared. Well, there's one p here, but there's 2 here. If it shows up in both places, you take the one that shows up the most number of times. So p squared shows up, right? P shows up twice here and only once here, so you take the one that shows up the most times. So that would be p squared. That's your common denominator. Okay? So now what you have to do is find out what your numerator is going to be. So you have to ask yourself, what did you do to 10p to get to 70p squared? Well, what did you multiply 10 by? A 7. So you multiply the top by a 7, right? Well, what did you multiply p by in order to get to p squared? Just a p. So you multiply those together. 3 times 7 is 21p. Plus, what about this? You took 14 and multiplied it by what to get to 70? Multiplied it by, that would be 5. Okay? So you multiply that by 5. What'd you do to p squared to get to p squared? Multiply by 1. Basically, you really didn't do anything, did you? Okay, you didn't change it at all. So really, all you got to do is just multiply those together. So that's plus what? 45. And that's it. That's your answer, isn't it? No, right. You can't add them because that's unlike terms. That's got a p and that doesn't. I was looking at it to see if anything would simplify because 3 goes into 21 and 3 goes into 45, but 3 doesn't go into 70. All right. These aren't even numbers, so 2 doesn't go into it. 5 doesn't go into everything because 5 doesn't go into this. So that's it. Nothing else goes. That's your answer. Is that the answer I wrote down? Okay. All right, so basically you just have to know how to find a common denominator. That was probably the hardest part. It's just taking 10 and 14 and figuring out what your common denominator was. But I showed you how to do it, so... Alright, so that's 1, that's 7, now we're doing 9. Okay, 9 is one of those complex fractions, is what they call them. Didn't we do one just like this in the review? Twice? Watch. Instead of plus m, I'm going to put plus m over 1. Okay, you guys watching? 1 over m minus 6. Okay. What's the first thing we do? I mean, looking at this, what's the first thing we can simplify we can do to this? M squared minus 36. Factor the thing, okay? And look, I cannot accept, I don't mean to be harsh, but I can't accept you saying, well, I wasn't sure where to start. You know why? Because twice we've gone over this problem as a review, haven't we? All right, and I've shown you twice how to start the thing. Okay, you've got to review the stuff on YouTube. You got to look at your notes that you took in class when you reviewed. The first thing we did was take this and factor it before we do anything else. All right. So this is a difference of 2 squares, just like the problem on the review. They were different numbers, but it's exactly the same. Well, not exactly. It's very close to it. Just the number's a little bit different. Still a difference of 2 squares. So that would be m plus 6 and m minus 6. Okay. So that just goes right here. Plus. Tell you what. Let's do this. Yeah, let's just do it right here. This is a 1 on the bottom, but if I want to get a common denominator, what am I going to have to do? This is a little different than I did on the review, but I'm just going to do it like this. Now watch. What did I multiply this by in order to get this denominator? All this stuff, didn't I? So what am I going to have to do to the top? I'm going to have to multiply it by all that stuff. M plus 6, m minus 6. So that's what's going to go up here. M times m plus 6, and then m minus 6. Alright, and that's all over this. Now look what I've done right here. I've got 2 fractions, they're added together, but now I found a common denominator, didn't I? Alright, so what I can do, I can rewrite this. Let's try to slide about right here. Look at this. This has a common denominator. It's just m plus 6, m minus 6. Okay, that's our denominator. And what's the top? It's 5 plus m times m plus 6, m minus 6. Okay, well, what are you doing to all this? Look at all that stuff on top. What's it doing? You're dividing by this thing right here. We've said this over and over again. What's the same thing as dividing in fractions? Multiplying by the reciprocal. So we multiply by the reciprocal, which is m minus 6 over 1. Put that in parentheses. Alright? This works out exactly the way we did it earlier. Okay, you can look at old YouTube videos when we went over this stuff. Watch what happens here. This m minus 6 does what to this m minus 6 right here? Cancels out. That goes, and that's basically your answer right there. You could leave it like that if you wanted to, okay? Or you could multiply it out. Remember what this stuff is right there? That's m squared minus 36. And that's being multiplied by this m. If you wanted to multiply it out, you could. So that would be what? M cubed minus 36m over what? That canceled out, so I just got an m plus 6. That's your answer. I think if you got it wrong, I think I wrote m cubed minus 36m plus 5 or something like that, right? But it doesn't make any difference. It's exactly the same. All right, so there it is. All right. Okay. All right, let's take a look at number 11. This has a negative exponent. You don't want a negative exponent, right? There's a couple ways to do this, but here's the way that I showed you. It's not really a trick, but it's like an easier way to do it. If I want to get rid of this negative exponent, I'm not going to take everything and flip it to the bottom. All right? I'm not going to put this over 1 and flip everything to the bottom. Now, could you do that? Sure. But we showed a little easier way. What do we do? And we talked about this like the day before we took this test. I remember doing a problem just like this, didn't we? I'm pretty sure. What do we do to that fraction? You flip it. That's right. So flip that fraction. So it's 25 over 4. Now, if I flip the fraction, what am I going to have to do to that sign? Make it positive. Change the sign of it. So that's to the positive 3/2. See that? So you flip the fraction, change the sign. You can do that. That's just like taking the whole thing, flipping it to the bottom, and changing the sign. It's just a lot easier this way, and that's the way we've taught for a long time now. So now what do? You got to figure out what this is. This is kind of like 2 exponents right here. it's 25/4 to the what? Half first, okay? And then we take that whole thing to the third. It's exactly the same thing, because what happens when I have an exponent taken to another power? I multiply the exponents together, that's 3/2. That and that are exactly the same thing. That's why there's equal signs in between all these things, because they're the same, they're equal, okay? What does this mean, though, to the 1/2 power? If I take anything to the 1/2 power, it's doing the same thing as doing what to it? Taking the square root. Is she the only one that knows that? Or just nobody saying anything? Okay, to the 1/2 power means you take the square root of that. We've harped and harped on that before. Okay? So you're just going to take the square root. Look, they've rigged this thing. Remember me saying that? They've rigged this so I can take the square root and it comes out real nice and easy. So 25 to the 1/2. What's that? It's the square root of 25, which is 5. Let's do this. 4 to the 1/2, or the square root of 4, which is 2. So 25/4 to the 1/2 power is the same thing as 5/2, because I just ended up taking the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom. Now that's not my answer. That's all being taken, all that's being taken to what power? The third power. Now look, everything in here is being taken to the third power. So it's 5 cubed over what? 2 cubed. Well, 5 cubed, you can do that in your head. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5, if I have 5 quarters, I have what? 125, right? Over what? 2 cubed. What's 2 cubed? It's 8. That's it. What do you think? And I can see that. Look, I make stupid mistakes all the time, okay? But not even knowing how to start it, or not even knowing the basic rules in here, that's unacceptable. Again, I don't want to be mean or anything, but it's the honest truth. Okay, I've gone over these enough, and I've given you all the resources that you need, okay, to be able to look at this problem and be able to know exactly what you're supposed to do. All right. Now look, I completely understand making a silly mistake, okay, an arithmetic error, or you messed up a sign somewhere, you know, because you're going too fast. That happens to everybody, no matter how good you are at math. That happens to everybody. All right, but you got to have the basic idea of how to solve this problem down. Okay, you can't just look at it and say, I have no idea where to start. Again, that's unacceptable. All right. Now I'm being real nice about it, but if you go to college, you know, they're not going to be so nice about it, depending on their teacher, of course. Not every college teacher is mean and nasty or anything like that. I don't mean to say that. Okay, but for the most part, now I was a math major too, so it may be a little different if you just take a normal, you know, everyday math class. But my experience was, they teach it to you, they expect you to know it, and no questions asked. I mean, they did let you ask questions in class and stuff like that. I mean, it's very similar to what the give and take is in high school. But you just have to know it. And if you don't, they're like, well, that's your fault. You know, I taught it. You should know it. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what the attitude was. And that's a college attitude, all right? So you just have to be ready for that. All right? What else? Anything else? Did you bring your old test, section 1.1 to 1.4, to go over it all? Do you have that? Maybe we'll hit a few of those. We got some time. All right, we're switching back to the first test, 1.1 to 1.4. So it says factor by grouping. So let's group them. What's that? Okay, factor by grouping. So what are you going to do? You could group them a couple different ways. Let's just group it the way they've got it right now. All right, so let's do that. So what we're going to do is find the greatest common factor in each of these groups. Okay? So look right here. I got a 10 and a 4. What's the greatest common factor with 10 and 4? There's a 2. What about the a's? A squared, a cubed. A squared. And there's no b, so that's the greatest common factor with that parentheses. Let's factor that out now and see what we get, what we have left. So if I factor out a 2 from a 10, so 10 divided by 2 is 5, and a cubed divided by a squared is a, minus, do the same thing here, take a 2 out of this, so that's a 2. The a squared goes, right? And then I've got a b. So that's all I've done right there. Just found the greatest common factor out of that first parentheses. Yep. Let's do the same thing over here on this one. Let's factor out a greatest common factor from this parentheses. I got 15 and 6. What's the number that goes into both of those? 3. Okay, I have an a, but there's not an a here, so I can't take out an a. I can take out a b squared. All right, let's figure out what's left over. So I'm taking this basically and dividing it by this. So 15 divided by 3 is 5. There's an a here. B squared over b squared, that's just a 1. Minus, do the division here. 6 divided by 3 is 2. B cubed over b squared is b. There it is. Now we're not done, because I can factor one more time, can't I? Look, I've got a common factor. This is kind of like greatest common factor again, isn't it? Except here's the first term and here's the second term. Is there something in common with both of those? Yeah, this parentheses, this 5a minus 2b is being multiplied by both of these things. So I factor out a 5a minus 2b. What's left after I factor it out? If I take this whole thing and divide it by 5a minus 2b, I get 2a squared. Right? Put a plus in between. Look, I'm factoring this out of this whole thing right here. What am I left with? 3b squared, and that's your answer. Just like that. Coming back? All right. Let's take a look at 19. 19 is a sum of two cubes. Well, you got to memorize the formula. All right? I don't make you memorize tons and tons of things, but there's a few things you have to memorize, and that would be one of them. Okay? So we're doing the sum of two cubes. So let's write it like this. A cubed plus b cubed. Remember how to factor this? It's two parentheses. The second one's a little bit bigger than the first one because we got 3 things in this and we got 2 things in this. First of all, we put the signs in there. How do you know what signs go in here? Very good. Same opposite positive. So that's the same sign as this. Right here would be the opposite sign of this. Okay, and then the last one will always be positive. That's the first thing you need to do. Now you got to figure out what goes in these spots. This is just a basic memorization, right? And I guess there's a little bit of a pattern to it, right? So what goes here and here? Well, it's a and b, right? And then on the outside, I always do the outside first. So it's kind of like that, except it's a squared. Because watch, a times a squared is going to be a cubed, isn't it? All right, so that's how I know an a squared is going to go there. What goes here on the end? A b squared. Because the very last thing I'm going to do is b times b squared, which is b cubed. What goes inside here? AB. That's it. Just memorize it. Right? Write it down 100 times. Okay, if you can't look at it and just sit there and memorize it. Okay, write it down a bunch of times so that you memorize that.
A cubed plus b cubed. Do I have the same test as you?
Number 19.
Because I have one for 19 or 125 x and 12.
He's just giving an example.
Right. Yeah, this is, I'm showing you that I said it already. This is the formula. This is the formula for the sum of two cubes. Okay? This is the formula for the sum of two cubes. All right? Now, I said that right from the beginning. Okay, I'm just setting this up. This is what you have to memorize right here. We're going to use this in order to factor what they give us. I haven't even started factoring yet. All I did was just write down the formula for it. Okay? So, let's see what we're trying to factor. We're trying to factor 125 x to the 12th plus 8y to the 6th. That's what I'm trying to factor. If you look at this, you're like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't look anything like this, except for the plus, and there's 2 things, all right? But it is, because is there something being cubed here? They've rigged this again. Is there something being cubed to give you 125? What is it? 5. It's 5 cubed, right? So I want to find out what is being cubed to give you this. What's being cubed to give you x to the 12th? X to the what? 4th, right? Okay, because watch, x to the 4th cubed is x to the 12th, isn't it? So what's being cubed? X to the 4th. So what's the a in this particular problem? 5x to the 4th. So everywhere we see an a in this little formula up here, we're going to plug in 5x to the 4th. Okay? Plus, do the same thing here. What's being cubed to give you this stuff? What's being cubed to give you 8? 2. 2 cubed is 8. That's a number you have to have memorized, okay? Absolutely. We've talked about that enough. 2 cubed is 8. What about this? What about y to the 6th? what's being cubed? Y to what power, or y, yeah, sorry, what cubed is going to be y to the 6th, y squared, right? Because 2 times 3 is 6, isn't it? So look what we have. Wherever you see an A, you're going to replace it with a 5x to the 4th. Wherever you see a B, you're going to replace it with 2y squared. All right? And then you just do what it says to do. So that's why I wrote the formula down. You understand? Okay, I think it's nice to have it written down. Then you can just look to see what's being cubed and plug all that stuff in. So what is the A? 5x to the 4th. Okay. What's the B? 2y squared. Now what we have to do is take that A and we have to square it. So that's our A right there, isn't it? And we have to square it. So what's 5 squared? 25. What's x to the 4th squared? X to the 8th. See? I took the A and I squared it. Okay. Minus. I'm going to leave a little space there because I like to square both things first before I do the multiplication. Oops, let me give myself a little bit more room. There we go. All right, let's take the B and square it. So this is the B, or this right here, either one of those. Let's square it. So 2 squared is 4. What's y squared squared? Y to the 4th. All right, so I took the A and I squared it, took the B and I squared it. Now I just take the A and the B, multiply them together, and stick them in the middle. So here's the A, here's the B, multiply those together. 5 times 2 is 10. And then I got an x to the 4th and a y squared. I can't really do anything, any combination of those, so I just leave it like that. And there's my answer right there. It's just a matter of, the math wasn't hard at all. The hardest math was this, taking this and figure out what's being cubed to give you 125x to the 12th. What is being cubed to give you 8y to the 6th? That was the hardest math, I think, out of the whole thing. The rest, it was just plug and chug, wasn't it? I mean, squaring something, that's not hard to square something, is it? Okay, and especially on this one, it's not hard to multiply two things together, right? So there you go. There's number 19. Here's what I'm going to do. Hopefully. I got to do this for a couple of my other classes. I'm going to spend a lot of time this weekend doing this. But I don't know when it'll be done. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take chapter 1, or this first chapter right here, and I'm going to go through all the other problems. I'll probably skip 15 and 19 because we already just did it, okay? But I'm going to go through all the other problems. I'm going to show you how to do every one of those problems. So it's up to you to go on YouTube, okay, watch this thing, okay? And now you don't have to watch every single problem, right? But if there's problems you don't know how to do, just kind of skip ahead until you get to that problem and then sit and watch that particular problem. You don't have to sit and watch the whole entire test being done in front of you, okay? If you want to, you could, but you can just skip to the problems that you really have questions on, okay? So that's the rest of the review, and look on your digital lockers for what day it is and all that kind of stuff, okay? All right, we'll see you.